long exposure tips and tricks using the Sony Creators app.
We'll be going over how to level up your photography in a ton of different scenarios, including using the app as a remote shutter, adjusting the settings on the go, how the shutter speed affects your long exposures, and also some light painting here in London and Paris.
My name is Mike Will, I am m.visuals. I'm a Sony European Imaging Ambassador. Let's get into it.
This app works on Android and iOS, so whatever phone you have, you'll be fine to download it today if you haven't already.
I'm going to be starting off by shooting long exposures here in Paris before we head back to London a little bit later in the video. All of the shots today will be shot on the Sony a7 IV using the Sony Creators app. So my current setting to this is 2-second exposure, f6.3 ISO, pretty low at 64. And I'm using the burst mode so I can control how many shots I get, because I'm probably going to have to edit a few of these together in Photoshop, because we've got trails coming towards us here from the car's onward traffic, and then we've got cars going away from us on this side. I'm using this screen as a monitor, so it's amazing. I can see exactly what I'm doing. You can also turn it around if you need to for landscape, but currently we're using that, getting some long exposures, trying not to get hit by cars. All right, there's a bus coming. We're going to use the bus here as it swings around. Let's go. Jeez, that was sick. So it just keeps shooting until I flick that off, and then obviously it stops. I can then preview it quickly. Wow, look at that shot there. That's a 5-star.
The interface on the app is super easy to use, especially if you've used an alpha camera before.
Changing the shutter speed on the go when shooting long exposures is clutch. And we're going to be going over this a little bit later in the video about how changing the shutter speed can create a very different light trail when shooting long exposures. We're set up here, some long exposures using the Sony Creators app. We've got leading lines coming in from the curb. We're gonna have some leading lines coming in from the bus when the bus comes of the long exposure, leading us towards the Eiffel Tower, which is looking awesome. My settings for this are 1.3 seconds. We've got an f4, we've got ISO 160 currently, but I'll adapt that depending on how the conditions go. And I can do all of that on my phone whilst I'm just checking it out. And obviously then it also means I can shoot in burst mode, so when the bus does come, I'll just hold it down, it's gonna shoot, 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 and we're gonna get some epic shots. Adding a subject in frame is a great way to add relatability and scale. So there's a bus coming down here, and I'm gonna jump into this frame here, using the Sony Creators app as a remote shutter. Light painting is another great way to get creative doing long exposures. We've got some really nice leading lines here. We've got our light, and obviously we're using the Sony Creators app.
Here I'm going to shoot on self-timer continuous with a 2-second timer, taking 5 images total. Light painting is all about trial and error, so have fun and get creative with it.
I've got the light right here. The Sony app is on. And then what we're gonna do basically is hit the shutter. I'm gonna stand still for 3 seconds, and then I'm gonna run and do the light painting with the light. So that's shot 1, and then shot 2. Okay, we're off. 2, 3, 4. Whew. The Sony Creators app made this so much easier for light painting. I'd recommend if you do try this, anything from a 2-second right the way through to 10-second exposure, but it does depend how dark the conditions are around you. The shots we took just now are on the screen.
So far, we've been over changing the camera settings on the app, along with the interface, using it as a remote shutter, and monitor for photo. It's also awesome to help get those video postcards. This was so simple to set up. Lock the camera off on a tripod and hit record via the Sony Creators app, using it as a monitor to check the frame.
You can also preview and style your images on the go, and then edit them quickly in Lightroom Mobile. All of the photos in this video have been edited with my preset collection. Head to the link in the description to check them out. Before we go over the shutter speeds and how that affects your long exposure light trails, you can also do wired data transfer with USB-C.
When transferring raw photo and video data, it takes some time to do it wirelessly. Wired transfer supports heavy data transfer to speed things up. We're going to test out how shooting different shutter speeds affects the bus blurs, starting at half a second, going right the way up to 10 seconds.
Long exposure blurs and trails. The shutter speed affects the kind of long exposure that you're going to create, and having the Sony Creators app makes this so much easier. We're starting off with half a second exposure.
When the bus or car comes, it's more of a blur, and this is something you can even do without a tripod. Next up, let's try 1 second. This is a really nice blur and it shows the colours and the movement, but it's also quite solid. Let's try 1.3 seconds. This is usually my favourite shutter speed for capturing buses. Next up, let's try 5 seconds. This is where the blurs turn into trails. Lastly, let's try 10 seconds. So I actually did not move from this position the entire time, and I changed all the settings using the Sony Creators app. So it was super easy for me to stay in frame. Which shot do you prefer, and what kind of shutter speed do you use when shooting long exposures? Let me know in the comments.
Test this out yourself. The link's in the description to download it and give it a go. Don't forget to use all these tips and tricks when you're out next shooting some long exposures. Big up for watching. Catch you guys in the next one very soon.